Hey guys, welcome to the College Predictor. Haven't posted in a while, mainly because college football season's been in the off season. My last video was predicting the Stanley Cup Finals. It aged horribly, but I'm gonna give today's shout out to the Edmonton Oilers for coming back down 3-0 and almost winning it. McDavid, you're a dog. Anyways, back to talking about college football. It is almost here. We are about 2.5 weeks away from the new season starting. And man, I'm excited. This is going to be a very interesting season. A lot of stars going to the NFL. Caleb Williams, Brock Bowers, all the big names you know from last year are gone. Also, much conference realignment. Obviously, the Pac-12 gone. Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. And speaking of SEC, that's what today's video is about. Preseason rankings, my predictions of how the SEC will do next year, how the teams will do. Okay, starting off with our first team, 16th ranked team, last place will be the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're a baseball school, and I have to add, they did just bring in Diego Pavia from New Mexico State through the transfer portal. I think he's a great addition. They still have Will Shepard, who's a really talented receiver, but they're not anywhere close to SEC caliber. I would not be surprised if they went 1-11 or 2-10 even. Next team up, unfortunately, I do love this team. It's one of my favorite teams, but with their talent, it's just not going to be a good year for them. The Arkansas Razorbacks. Now this pick shows Arkansas is 15th, but what this could mean is I think Arkansas could make the playoffs. I think every team from here on has the ability to make the playoffs. Arkansas, they just lost KJ Jefferson. Their quarterback is Taylon Green. We don't know how he's going to do. They lost Rocket Sanders to South Carolina in the portal. They still have some good receivers like Sagatena. And they still have a good old line, a solid defense. But just they're not as talented as the other SEC teams. Arkansas, I would say 5-7, maybe 6-6. Number 14, Ohio State, Mississippi State. Will Rogers is gone. We don't know what their team's going to look like next year. I mean, there's a lot of questions about this Bulldog roster. We do know they're in the SEC. Makes things a lot harder when you have questions, because they have to play Georgia, Bama, LSU, Oklahoma. Their season is loaded. Not to mention Tennessee, Ole Miss. It's going to be a hard year for them. I do think Mississippi State could make a bowl game and could win some SEC games. I think they could beat Florida, A&M, maybe even Missouri, but I don't think they're going to have too much success. I'm taking Mississippi State to be the 14th team. 13 is going to be the Auburn Tigers. Yes, I know Auburn's a very talented team. They're rivals of Bama, almost beat Bama last year, who had Jalen Milroe, who's also returning. Auburn, I feel like they're always one player away, one step away from being great. I'm still going to say it. Auburn could be a playoff team, but they have to win the big games. Peyton Thorne is coming back to be their starting quarterback. I believe the starting running backs can either go to Jeremiah Cobb, Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston. Their running back room is amazing. They also got Cam Coleman, a 5-star wide receiver in recruiting. They also got Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. They have a good roster, but they're going to need to perform in the big games against Bama, Georgia, LSU. I mean, their schedule is really tough. Their SEC schedule includes of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Bama, A&M. So, if they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win at least 8 of their SEC games. If not, sorry Auburn, playoffs are not for you. Next team up, the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, Kentucky is a basketball school, but they have been better at football recently, and a lot of people look at their season records and resume and say, wow, they're consistently making bowl games. That's pretty good. But if you look at why they make bowl games, they don't look as good. They're scheduling weak teams year after year. I mean, this year their out-of-conference schedule is Murray State, Southern Mississippi and Ohio. Obviously, Louisville in the rivalry game. Kentucky is a pretty good team, but they have to beat Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, plus Texas. If they need to win 2 out of those 4 games and then win out. So it's going to be a tough path for Kentucky to make the playoffs. But they have some good players on the roster. Brock Vandegrift, Georgia transfer, Gavin Wimsett, Rutgers transfer. Will be a little bit of a quarterback battle there. But Barryon Brown is the guy you need to look for. He is one of the best speedy receivers in the game. I expect him to catch a lot of deep balls this year, a lot of touchdowns. This is going to be a good team, but they're not going to be good enough to win the SEC or make the playoffs. Next team on deck, the Florida Gators. This one is a controversial pick for me and a lot of people, but Florida, they never can perform when everyone expects them to. Florida is a very talented team. I believe Graham Mertz is still going to be there. They did just lose their best receiver, Ricky Pearsall, but they still have a really good team. I mean, they got 2 5-stars, including the number 1 quarterback in the class. So they have a chance, but they're going to probably be redshirted. So I think Florida can win some games, but we know they're going to lose 1 to Georgia. They're probably going to lose to LSU. I don't think Florida is a playoff team. Can they make it? Absolutely. Will they make it? Probably not. All right, last team that really would have a tough path to make the playoffs is the South Carolina Gamecocks. Spencer Rattler is off to the NFL. New Orleans Saints drafted him. Who is going to be their quarterback? Now, we know South Carolina is a consistent team, but they're going to have Robbie Ashford from Auburn, who wasn't the most impressive, but he can still get the job done. Not to mention, Lenora Sellers will probably be their backup, maybe even the starter later in the year. They got Oscar Attaway III from North Texas as a transfer. He was a former 1,000-yard rusher. That's a good pickup. Not to mention, they have some really speedy receivers, such as Nick Harbor, 6'5", and he is a really fast receiver. He is going to be a very important part if they want to do good this year. So is Brady Hunt, the tight end. I mean, this team has the potential to be great, but they can't win the big games. We learned that. They'll always win too late. For example, if I look through their schedule, they're going to be Old Dominion, but they have Bama, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss back-to-back-to-back. I don't think they survive that stretch, much less if they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to beat Clemson. So, I don't think it's meant for South Carolina. Okay, the remaining 9 teams, I think all of them can make the playoffs. But the number 9th team will be the Texas A&M Aggies, a.k.a. the chokers of college football. Now, A&M is also a talented team, just like every other SEC school besides Vanderbilt. But A&M has a history of recruiting top 5 classes with 18 5-stars and then going in and winning 6 games. I mean, this team, for how good they are, wins so little games. I mean, Marcel Reed and Connor Wigeman will probably be the starting quarterbacks. It'll probably change throughout the year, just like it did last year. But he still has Moose Mohammed, the senior. He had some breakout games a couple of years ago. They got Noah Thomas. He'll probably be the receiver 1 at 6'6". This is, once again, I'm going to keep saying it, this is a very talented team. But they have a history of losing to small schools such as Appalachian State. So their schedule this year, if we look at it, Notre Dame week 1, I don't think they win that game. Then they got McNeese, who they beat. And watch out for Bowling Green and New Mexico State. Those are some games that could potentially go rough for A&M with their history of losing to smaller schools. I think they can pull off upsets. Their last game is against Texas. But their SEC schedule is not that difficult. They have Florida, they're going to beat Arkansas, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Auburn. The only teams they have to really worry about are Missouri, Texas, and LSU. If they could get out of the season beating 2 of those 3 teams and actually could perform against the smaller schools, they could get in the playoffs losing to Notre Dame and LSU, let's say. So A&M could very well make the playoffs, but they're going to need to learn how to perform against MAC schools and Sun Belt schools. Next team up just had one of the best seasons in program history, the Missouri Tigers. Now, no one really talked about Missouri going into last year, but I gotta say, this team's good. They got a 5-star in recruiting. He'll be good in a couple years. Just need to give him time to develop in the college level. But they still have some other stars. They still have Brady Cook. Sam Horn will be a great backup. They got Marcus Carroll, one of my favorite running backs in transfer portal from last year, whatever you say. Georgia State, 1,000-yard rusher, amazing player. They still have Luther Burden, who was one of the SEC's best receivers last year. Plus Mookie Cooper, one of the speedy receivers. Not to mention Theo Weiss, their whole receiving core is coming back. This team's good. On defense, they still have a lot of their players, a lot of new faces on defense. I think that's really the question of how this team's going to do. Will their defense perform like their offense? Because Missouri could score 42 points. But if they can't stop Georgia, Texas, they're not going to do good. Is Missouri a playoff team? They're going to need a win. I think no more than 2 good losses, and Missouri could be a playoff level. Top 7. Now, I could go wherever I want with these teams. But my number 7 team is going to be the LSU Tigers. They just lost the big 3. Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, and Jaden Daniels, all to the NFL. This team, once again, loaded with roster talent. Week 1 against USC. USC is a fake football school. They're going to beat them. And then they also play UCLA. So they have 2 free wins, as well as Nichols, the FCS school. So they're going to be probably 4-0 to start the season, assuming they can beat South Carolina on the road. Then they got South Alabama. LSU should start 5-0. Then it's the challenge. They got Ole Miss, A&M, Bama, and OU. I think LSU could get in the playoffs with 3 losses, but they got to perform well in those losses, especially against Bama, Oklahoma. And if they can pull one of those upsets up and beat the teams they should beat, LSU is a scary team. Now, the question for LSU, who will replace Jaden Daniels? I mean, he just won the Heisman. I mean, we know the answer. It's going to be Garrett Nussmeier. But how will he perform? He's a junior. He's been waiting his turn. I don't know how he'll do. C.J. Daniels, the Liberty transfer, will probably be his number 2 receiver. Number 1 receiver will probably be Kyron Lacey. They still have Mason Taylor, one of the best tight ends in college football. They got the best lineman in college football, Will Campbell. Watch out for LSU. SEC should be scared of them. All right, top 6. I think from LSU up, all 7 of those teams might make the playoffs. But number 6, the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, Oklahoma, in the Big 12, were always dominant. Dylan Gabriel's gone, however, so that hurts. They do have Jackson Arnold, who's one of the best young quarterbacks in college football as well. Casey Thompson will be a great backup. Their running back room is very good with Gabe Schwach, the brother of Gavin Schwach, who will probably be the starter. And the receiving core, they still have Andrell Anthony, Nick Anderson, and Jalil Farouk, not to mention Deion Burks, the transfer from Purdue. Good news about Oklahoma is they still have Billy Bauman and some very good linebacker talent, such as Danny Stutzman, but they don't have to play Kansas. That's huge. Now, their season opens up with 3 wins, most likely, Temple, Houston, and Tulane. Then they play Maine later in the season. The games you need to watch out for are Texas, Tennessee, at Ole Miss, Bama, and at LSU. That's a tough 5 games. I think if they could even get out of there with 3 wins, they'll be a playoff team. Not to mention Adrian Peterson, right there in the screen picture, right next to the OU helmet. One of the best running backs in Oklahoma history. Great NFL career. Adrian Peterson, shout out. Top 5 teams. Here we go. Number 5, I can go wherever I want with here. But we're going to go with the Texas Longhorns. Very, very controversial pick here. Quinn Ewers is coming back. And that could mean a potential Arch Manning transfer at the end of the year. Who knows? But they just lost Xavier Worthy to the NFL. They also lost to Donnie Mitchell. This team has questions as well. C.J. Baxter will be a great running back, however. Jadon Blue will be good too. They got Isaiah Bond from Alabama. They got Parker Livingstone, who's one of the better slot receivers in the league. And they still have Gunnar Helm, who's a kind of a specialist blocking tight end. This team also has questions, but their schedule says a different story. They have to play Michigan, the reigning national champions, in week 2 on the road. Not to mention Colorado State right before that. That's a hard team to play. Their SEC schedule is not the hardest. Their only real challenge is Oklahoma and Georgia. I think they could make the playoffs. If they could just deal with Michigan, they're going to make the playoffs. Texas, you're a playoff team, even though you're number 5 in the SEC. Number 4 in the SEC, Hotty Toddy, the Ole Miss Rebels. Jackson Dart is coming back. They still have a lot of talent on their team. Cade Prescorn. This team, for the first time, looks like a contender for the actual national title. Ole Miss, I think, could already be considered a playoff lock as well. Their schedule is not too difficult out of conference, with Furman, Wake Forest, Middle Tennessee State, and Georgia Southern. Now in the SEC, there are only 3 hard games are LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia, maybe Florida. They go 2 for 4 in those games. Ole Miss is in the playoffs. Now, I know they just lost Quinshon Judkins to the transfer portal going to Ohio State. This team's still stacked. All right, top 3. Number 3 team will be Alabama. Just lost a ton of players to the NFL. Still got Milroe. Still got a lot of talent on their team. Their defense is still good. They got Caleb Downs from the transfer portal, I believe. So, Bama is a good-looking, scary team. Nick Saban retired. We don't know how Kalen DeBoer is going to do there. The Washington coach just led a stacked Washington team to the national title. This Bama team is probably the same talent level, but all the players have a different style of chemistry with each other. And I think because of that, Bama can drop a couple games to Oklahoma, Georgia, Tennessee, maybe. Number 2 team, Carson Beck to back, but he ain't getting first. Georgia Bulldogs, number 2. Georgia is definitely going to make the playoffs. If Georgia doesn't make the playoffs, then I will be shocked. I will literally become an NFL fan. But, I mean, they got Clemson week 1, but we know they have a history of dominating teams in Atlanta. Then they got Tennessee Tech. Bama is up there. They also got at Texas, at Ole Miss, and then versus Tennessee. Georgia could lose 4 games and still make the playoffs. This team's stacked. Georgia, you could go for another natty. Number 1, my Heisman pick, and the team winning the SEC, and the team getting the number 2 spot in the playoffs, the Tennessee Volunteers. Nico Iamaleava, a great passing quarterback, and a astonishing running quarterback. This team is good. Really good. I mean, their running back room's pretty good. They got Dylan Sampson. He's small, 5'11", but he is a strong running back. They got Brew McCoy at receiver. They got Dante Thornton. Squirrel White's coming back. I mean, this roster is incredible. On defense, they got Caleb Herring, great defensive lineman. They got great DBs. This team's just great. Now, their schedule isn't the worst. Like I said, they have to play Georgia, at Georgia. They could drop that game. They could afford to drop that game. But they got Chattanooga, Kent State, UTEP as their out-of-conference schedule, and NC State. I think they could win NC State. Their only hard SEC games are OU, Bama, and Georgia. I think they go 2 for 3 there. They lose to Georgia on the road. They will be OU and Alabama. This team's scary, man. I'm telling you. Tennessee, watch out for Rocky Top. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I'll be doing the Big Ten next. But until then, I'm ready for college football season. See you later.